Nietzsche revealed the secret. Most women don't want you to know. The individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe, Nietzsche once wrote. But what if I told you that the most dangerous tribe of all isn't the poe, one outside your door? It's the one inside your own relationships? Here's a truth that cuts through every romantic comedy, every dating advice column, every well-meaning conversation with friends. Most of what you've been taught about love is a sophisticated form of slavery. And the chains aren't just invisible. They're celebrated. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher who dared to declare God dead, understood something about human nature that modern society desperately tries to hide. He saw through the veneer of romantic idealism to expose what he called the will to power, the fundamental drive that governs all human behavior, including the relationships we hold most sacred. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Nietzsche observed that in romantic relationships there's always a master and a slave, always someone who needs and someone who is needed, always someone who chases and someone who is chased. And society has convinced you that being the chaser, the needer, the one who sacrifices, that this makes you noble, that this makes you loving. What if I told you it just makes you weak? Think about the last time you felt truly powerful in a relationship. Not the fake power of manipulation or control, but genuine strength, the kind where you didn't need anything from the other person to feel complete. Can you remember such a moment? If you're honest, probably not, because most of us have been conditioned to find our identity not in our own strength, but in how desperately we're wanted by someone else. This conditioning runs so deep that we've created an entire mythology around it. We call it romantic love, but what we're really describing is psychological dependency dressed up in beautiful language. We praise the man who gives up his dreams for a woman. We celebrate the person who becomes smaller to make their partner feel bigger. We worship the idea that true love means losing yourself in another person. But Nietzsche saw through this beautiful lie. He called this phenomenon slave morality, the belief that weakness is virtue, that neediness is love, that dependence is devotion. And nowhere is this more evident than in how we approach romantic relationships. We've been taught to celebrate the very behaviors that make us weak. Endless texting, constant availability, emotional dependency, the sacrifice of personal goals for relationship harmony. Watch how people behave when they're in love. They stop pursuing their own interests. They abandon their friendships. They reshape their entire identity around making one person happy. They call this devotion, but what it really is the complete abdication of personal power. And here's the cruel irony. The more desperately you need someone, the less they want you. The more you sacrifice yourself for them, the less they respect you. The smaller you make yourself, the less attractive you become. It's a vicious cycle that destroys both people involved. Nietzsche understood that genuine strength looks completely different than what we've been taught. It's not about being cruel or distant. It's about being so complete as an individual that your love becomes a gift rather than a burden. Your presence becomes a choice rather than a necessity. But what if strength, real strength, looked completely different than what you've been taught? What if the secret to genuine attraction wasn't in how much you could sacrifice, but in how little you needed to? Nietzsche spent his life studying power dynamics, and he discovered something profound. The strongest people are those who need nothing from others to feel complete. He called this concept self-overcoming, the ability to create your own values, your own meaning, your own sense of worth without external validation. In his notebooks, he wrote about the Übermensch, not a superhuman being, but simply a person who has transcended the need for others' approval to feel valuable. And here's what's fascinating. When you study the dynamics of attraction, you realize that this kind of emotional independence isn't just philosophically superior, it's magnetically attractive. Think about it. When you observe couples, who holds the power? Is it the person who constantly seeks reassurance, who changes their entire schedule to accommodate the other, who loses themselves in the relationship? Or is it the person who maintains their own identity, pursues their own goals, and could walk away tomorrow if the relationship stopped serving them? The answer is obvious, yet most people spend their entire lives doing the opposite of what actually works. We've been sold a lie that love means making yourself smaller, that devotion means making yourself weaker, that commitment means making yourself more dependent. But Nietzsche understood that the opposite is true. Genuine attraction flows toward strength, not weakness. Toward independence, not neediness. Toward self-mastery, not self-abandonment. This principle operates at the deepest levels of human psychology. When someone is emotionally dependent on you, it creates an unconscious sense of burden. When someone needs your validation to feel good about themselves, it becomes exhausting to be around them. When someone has no life outside of the relationship, they become predictable, boring, and ultimately unattractive. But when someone is genuinely self-contained, when they have their own goals, their own interests, their own sense of purpose, they become fascinating. They become unpredictable in the best possible way. They become someone worth earning, rather than someone who's automatically available. This isn't about being cold or distant. It's about understanding that the most loving thing you can do for someone is to be so complete as an individual that your presence in their life is a gift, not a necessity. When you need nothing, you can give everything. When you're dependent on nothing, you can appreciate everything. Nietzsche wrote extensively about what he called amor fati, the love of one's fate, the complete acceptance of life as it is. In relationships, this translates to something revolutionary. The ability to be completely okay with any outcome, to genuinely not need the relationship to work out in order to feel good about yourself. But here's where most people get confused. They think emotional independence means not caring. They think strength means cruelty. They think self-mastery means selfishness. This is the fundamental misunderstanding that keeps people trapped in weak, needy dynamics. True strength is the ability to love without attachment, to care without desperation, to commit without losing yourself. It's the difference between choosing to be with someone and needing to be with someone. And that difference changes everything. When you choose to be with someone from a position of strength, you bring your best self to the relationship. You're not looking for them to complete you. You're already complete. You're not seeking their validation. You already know your worth. You're not trying to fill a void in your life. Your life is already full. This creates an entirely different dynamic. Instead of two incomplete people trying to use each other to feel whole, you have two whole people choosing to share their completeness. Instead of desperation and neediness, you have genuine appreciation and respect. Instead of fear and insecurity, you have confidence and trust. Nietzsche saw this clearly. The person who has mastered themselves becomes a creator of values rather than a follower of them. In relationships, this means you're not constantly seeking validation or trying to prove your worth. You know your worth, you embody it, and others feel it. Here's the paradox that Nietzsche understood, but modern dating culture completely misses. The harder you try to be attractive, the less attractive you become. The more you need someone's approval, the less likely you are to get it. The more you chase, the faster they run. Why? Because neediness is the enemy of attraction. Desperation is the opposite of desire. When you need someone to want you in order to feel valuable, you've already lost the game. This operates on levels so deep that most people never even recognize it. When you're interacting with someone you're attracted to, your entire energy shifts if you need their approval. Your voice changes. Your body language becomes less confident. You start monitoring their reactions instead of expressing yourself authentically. You become reactive instead of creative. And people feel this energy immediately. They might not be able to articulate what's happening, but they instinctively know when someone needs something from them. And that need, no matter how well disguised, creates an unconscious resistance. Nietzsche wrote about amor fati, the love of fate, the acceptance of what is. In relationships, this translates to something revolutionary, the ability to be completely okay with any outcome, to genuinely not need the relationship to work out in order to feel good about yourself. This isn't a strategy or a manipulation technique. It's a fundamental shift in how you relate to your own worth. When you truly understand that your value doesn't depend on anyone else's recognition of it, everything changes. You stop being reactive. You stop being desperate. You stop being weak. And here's what happens when you embody this kind of strength. People notice. They're drawn to it. They want to understand it. They want to be around it. Because in a world full of needy, desperate, approval-seeking people, someone who is genuinely self-contained becomes fascinating. But this creates another paradox. The moment you use this understanding as a technique to get what you want, you've missed the point entirely. You can't fake emotional independence. You can't pretend to be self-contained while secretly hoping for validation. The energy you put out is the energy you get back, and desperation disguised as confidence is still desperation. This is why Nietzsche emphasized becoming who you are, not who you think others want you to be, not who society tells you to be, but who you actually are beneath all the conditioning and expectations. When you're operating from your authentic self rather than from a place of strategic positioning, you naturally embody the kind of strength that's genuinely attractive. Think about the people in your life who have this quality. They're not trying to impress anyone. They're not constantly seeking approval. They're simply being themselves with complete confidence and authenticity. And people are naturally drawn to them. Not because they're perfect, but because they're real. Not because they have no flaws, but because they're comfortable with their flaws. Most people spend their entire lives performing a version of themselves they think others will like. They modify their opinions, their interests, their goals, their very personality to fit what they believe will make them more lovable. But Nietzsche understood that this is the path to weakness, not strength. When you're constantly adapting yourself to please others, you never develop the authentic power that comes from knowing exactly who you are and being completely comfortable with that person. The truly powerful person doesn't need to convince anyone of their worth. They simply embody it. They don't need to win anyone over. They're already complete. They don't need to prove themselves. Their presence is proof enough. This is what creates genuine charisma, not the fake charisma of someone desperately trying to be liked, but the real charisma of someone who is completely comfortable in their own skin. The kind of person who says what they mean, means what they say, and doesn't apologize for being who they are. When you meet someone like this, you immediately feel it. There's something magnetic about their presence. They're not trying to take anything from you. Your approval, your validation, your energy. They're simply sharing who they are. And that sharing, when it comes from a place of completeness rather, the neediness is incredibly attractive. So how do you actually become this person? How do you develop the kind of authentic strength that Nietzsche wrote about? It starts with a simple but profound shift. You must become more interested in becoming who you are than in being who others want you to be. This means developing what Nietzsche called self-reverence, a deep respect for your own thoughts, feelings, goals, and values. It means creating a life so rich and fulfilling that no single person could make or break your happiness. It means building such a strong relationship with yourself that you genuinely enjoy your own company more than the company of someone who doesn't appreciate you. But let's be specific about what this actually looks like in practice. Because understanding the philosophy is one thing, living it is another entirely. First, you must ruthlessly examine your own motivations. Every time you're about to do something for someone else, ask yourself, am I doing this because I genuinely want to, or because I'm hoping to get something in return? Am I acting from love or from need? Am I giving from abundance or giving to fill a void? This level of self-honesty is brutal, but it's necessary. Most of our generous acts are actually subtle forms of manipulation. We give to get. We sacrifice to create obligation. We make ourselves smaller to make others feel indebted to us, and then we wonder why our relationships feel transactional and unsatisfying. True generosity comes from overflow, not from emptiness. When you're genuinely complete as a person, you can give without attachment to the outcome. You can love without needing to be loved back in a specific way. You can care without needing your caring to be reciprocated. In practical terms, this looks like pursuing your passions regardless of whether they impress anyone. It looks like setting boundaries that protect your energy and time. It looks like being willing to walk away from situations that don't serve you, even when walking away is difficult. It looks like choosing integrity over approval, authenticity over acceptance. But here's the crucial part. This isn't about becoming selfish or uncaring. It's about becoming so secure in yourself that you can love others without needing them. You can care about their well-being without being dependent on their validation. You can commit to relationships without losing your identity in them. This requires developing what Nietzsche called psychological sovereignty, the ability to govern your own emotional state regardless of external circumstances. When someone rejects you, you don't collapse. When someone criticizes you, you don't react defensively. When someone tries to manipulate you, you don't take the bait. This isn't because you don't care. It's because you care about the right things. You care about your own integrity more than you care about being liked. You care about your own growth more than you care about being comfortable. You care about your own authenticity more than you care about fitting in. When you embody this kind of strength, you naturally attract people who are drawn to genuine power rather than neediness. You stop attracting people who want to fix you, save you, or complete you, and you start attracting people who want to share a life with someone who is already whole. This creates relationships based on mutual respect rather than mutual need. Instead of two incomplete people trying to use each other to feel complete, you have two complete people choosing to enhance each other's already fulfilling lives. But developing this kind of strength isn't easy. It requires facing the parts of yourself you'd rather ignore. It requires sitting with discomfort instead of immediately seeking relief from others. It requires building a relationship with solitude, with uncertainty, with the unknown parts of yourself. Most people would rather remain weak and dependent than do this work. They'd rather live in the comfortable prison of neediness than face the terrifying freedom of genuine independence. They'd rather blame others for their unhappiness than take responsibility for their own emotional state. Nietzsche believed that most people live their entire lives without ever becoming who they truly are. They die as strangers to themselves, having spent all their energy trying to please others. But he also believed that a few people, the ones willing to do the difficult work of self-discovery, could transcend this trap. The question is, which kind of person will you be? Will you continue seeking validation from others, making yourself smaller to fit into someone else's life, sacrificing your authentic self for the illusion of love? Or will you do the hard work of becoming genuinely strong, so complete in yourself, that your presence in someone's life is a gift, not a need? This isn't just about relationships. This is about life itself. When you understand that your worth doesn't depend on anyone else's recognition of it, you become truly free. Free to love without attachment. Free to care without desperation. Free to commit without losing yourself. And in that freedom, you become the kind of person that others genuinely want to be around. Not because you need them to, but because you've become genuinely worth being around. The path isn't easy. It requires courage, honesty, and a willingness to be misunderstood by people who are still trapped in the old paradigm. But the alternative, a life of emotional dependency and validation seeking, is far worse. The choice is yours. But remember, most people will never make this choice. They'll continue living in the comfortable prison of neediness and validation seeking. They'll keep believing that weakness is virtue and dependence is love. But you now know better. You know the secret Nietzsche revealed. The question is, what will you do with it? Will you use this knowledge to become genuinely strong, genuinely independent, genuinely attractive? Or will you continue playing the same old games, hoping that somehow this time neediness will be rewarded? The world is waiting for people who have done this work. People who are genuinely strong, genuinely independent, genuinely authentic. People who can love without attachment, care without desperation, commit without losing themselves. The question is, will you be one of them?